So after that round of golf had ended, so now, kind of like I was explaining, you have a bunch of guys coming in all at the same time. And so we saw at that point Brian Urlacher, and hello, I wanted to say hi. But, here's the deal for people to realize, again, these are humans. So they're not trying to just have their meal, but also have me come up and just start blabbing to them. So you bide your time, and you have to be professional, as you should be. They don't owe me anything. As I said before, I don't believe just because they're professional athletes, that means they have to be on all the time. They're doing a thing. There's a designated time to ask them questions and everything. So we saw Mr. Urlacher sit down, and he was eating a meal. So we left him alone. So we sat down to eat as well. So sure enough, we sit down and tell him what happens next, because this is great from your vantage point.
Yeah, my back was to the dessert table, and we were sitting there talking, and then out of nowhere she goes, "Hey, where's Zeke at?" And I'm like, "Zeke?" I didn't realize anybody was behind me, and it was Brian Urlacher with his snake that he pranks everybody with. But when she said Zeke, I'm like, no, I don't think Zeke's gonna be here. I don't know why you're asking.
Envision Brian Urlacher being out of your vision. In my eyes, I'm like facing you, and I'm going, but he has no idea we're just having a conversation, having a meal, and I'm going, and then he comes into your view, and then you realize why I had that look on my face. So sure enough, we didn't have to go up to Brian. We didn't have to interrupt his meal. He came over to the dessert table.
That's great.
Got to post up at the right spot,
Yeah.
Here's the exclusive from the Discard Show. Brian Urlacher likes cookies. You heard it here first, folks. No, he was great. He was delightful. So here's the story on that. Have you seen Brian Urlacher's social media? I would say it's probably everywhere.
No, I've not.
So he carries around this...
A
fake snake named Zeke. And it has become a viral sensation just in and of itself. But essentially, as do a lot of retired players, they like to play golf.
Yeah.
So he plays golf with his buddies, and he carries around this plastic snake.
That's awesome.
And what he'll do is he'll surreptitiously plant it someplace
and
record the reaction. And it never fails that this has been, 10 years plus probably he's been doing this. Gets them every time. They are running and jumping every time. And so the name of this plastic snake is Zeke. So I was like, you had to jump on your opportunity. Mr. Urlacher was going to the dessert table, and I went, "Hey, you got Zeke with you?" And he said, "He's in the bag."
That's awesome. That's so great.
Awesome. So then I got a chance to talk to him, get a couple sound bites from him, and of course, being from Illinois myself, thinking, if you're following anything, if you're from Chicago or you're just a big football fan, you know about the transition, possibly, we're going to still air quote possibly, from moving from Chicago, Soldier Field.
You're really holding on hope, huh?
I am, yeah, into the burbs, Arlington Heights, where I was born and raised. So I dropped that on him, being, of course, a cold weather guy, gridiron. I mean, hard nose. How would you describe Brian Urlacher?
A Chicago Bear.
A Chicago Bear.
That's that simple.
Sums it up perfectly. So one of the most badass, toughest players that you can get when you're playing in that weather. We've been to Lambeau. You've been to Lambeau. Mm-hmm. Boot story is critical. We're going to talk about the boot story sometime. Frito's boot story. But
that was actually Minnesota, too.
Oh, that was Minnesota. That wasn't Lambeau. Was it against the Packers? Where did I bring up? I guess I was just reminiscing about my cold experience in Lambeau and thinking Lambeau, but yeah.
And Brian coached in Green Bay. That's where I got.
That's what it was. Yeah, he was up in Lambeau at the time.
Oh, okay. I knew there was a connection.
Yeah, that's why Brian had the snow boots, was because he coached in.
Sure, yes.
Green Bay for a while.
So I asked Brian Urlacher. I said, what do you think about the possibility of the stadium moving? He goes, you know what? Again, I get it, hate it, don't like it, and again, we get that as well. It's like, when you're from that area, how do you go from the Chicago Soldier Field? And he had such love and admiration for that place. But again, if you have never been to Lambeau, to Minnesota, to Soldier Field, there is no way to explain the sensation of the wind hitting your face on those cold weather games to describe how painful and how difficult that must have been. He was like, that is what it is. Yeah. It just is what it is. So he understands completely the idea of moving, but he's like, what do you think? Do you think there's going to be a dome? I'm like, there's got to be a dome. He's like, so he really is that kind of hard-nosed football player. He is a Chicago Bear, and that puts it perfectly. But he could go back and forth on the idea of the potential for the new stadium. So that was cool to get that take from him. So what else did I ask him?
Do you know who Robbie Gould is? He said no. He said no.
Well, see,
and he said he's a kicker, and he said that's why I don't know.
Blasphemy.
I was about to say, nobody's going to know who Robbie Gould is because it's gold. It's
gold.
My
bad.
How dare you?
No. It's all good. It's understandable.
You talked about your connection with your friend with the restore thing.
Yeah,
as well.
Absolutely. I don't know if you know, Brian Arlecker went through a whole hair restoration process.
Yes.
So we had a connection there. A friend of mine works for Restore, and so she's known Brian for years.
So it really works.
It really works. In fact, he's like, so our friend, the mutual person that we know, her name is Kylie. And I was like, hey, I know Kylie. And he's like, oh my God, she's the best. And he's like, she's going to be really mad. I got this hat on right now. And so we kind of took his hat off. No, it works. He was pumped about it. He's like, no, it absolutely works. But, that's what's so interesting again is he was very nice. He was very open to talking. He was personable. He was totally friendly. I mean, there was nothing I could say about that interaction that rubbed me the wrong way, and it left me wanting more. It left me wanting more to hear from these athletes.
That's great.
So that's the Brian Urlacher story. Let me go ahead and transition into my next story here, which is, it was just such a phenomenal experience. So DeMarcus Ware, we'd seen him last year play. He was back again this year playing. Again, sitting down, we're just feeding our face. This is how you kind of run into people. And sitting at the table next to us was DeMarcus Ware. And of course, again, just being polite, we weren't, you don't, again, interrupt people in the middle of a conversation or in the midst of their meal or anything like that. But I kind of navigated to outside, and him and the people he was with, they were just kind of chit-chatting at that point. And I said, okay, I might go over there. So this is why Zach and I work so well together, because the facts that this man knows, the people that he knows, his wherewithal for like the players, the who, the when, the why, this guy's like a walking encyclopedia. And so that is really cool because I can recognize DeMarcus Ware because I just recognize who he is. But the other two gentlemen he was with, like I wouldn't have known who he was with personally, but Zach did. And so Zach was like...
Yeah, I was sitting there, they look awfully familiar, and I kind of racked my brain for 2 or 3 minutes and recognized Jason Hatcher from the Cowboys. They were all kind of drafted.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and he looks a lot different now, too. So
that's what it is.
That was the tough part, is like, he looks familiar, but... So after like racking my brain for a second, I sat on Google and I kind of figured it out, and it ended up being very, very cool opportunity.
It was amazing. So I walked up to these two gentlemen and I just made a dumb joke. What can I say? I was just like, well, that's a big chair to fill. I said, he seems like the talker of the group. And they were kind of like, huh? It's like, DeMarcus, he seemed like the talker of the group because they're all having a great conversation. And what was really cool is both Anthony and Jason look at each other, point at each other and go, no, he's the talker. No, he's the talker. But it was amazing. They invited me to sit down and we proceeded to have an hour-long conversation about life.
That's amazing. That's impressive.
It was amazing. And I know I keep saying that word, but that was genuinely how easy these two gentlemen were to talk with. Mm-hmm. We, kind of interacted. They said, what do you do? I'm like, well, my day job is, I'm a therapist. And they were amazing about that. They were just like, that is really cool. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's pretty cool what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I told them that, and then of course I advertised the show, and I just said, but right now I'm in the Discard Show podcast mode, and I told them about the podcast, and they thought it was great. They thought it was really cool. I'm hoping that they're going to come on. Mentioned that, hey, people would really love to hear what you guys have been up to. Please come on. Please tell everybody what's up, because people would love to hear from you guys.
Did you get any numbers, or did they give you...
we are connected, and I'm gonna hope to kind of keep in touch with them to try and trying to get them in. So they're local. That's what's cool. So they can come around and do a recording. But they were awesome. I'll give you one more tidbit from that conversation. Again, the whole point of the Discard Show is to hear about the lives of people and the value of people and what's going on. And these guys have families. They've got careers after, their playing days, and we're sitting around just talking about fear and talking about confidence and building self-confidence and how other people will want to infiltrate your circle and try and knock you down. And too much social media is gonna knock you down. And talking about the difference of playing, maybe, back in the early 2000s versus now, what the players have to deal with now. So one of the coolest things that they had to talk about is, build your self-confidence up, know who you are, have a strength in who you are, and you're unstoppable. You're unstoppable, but you do have to keep working on that. Another cool tidbit was we talked about sports psychology and how actually a lot of sports psychology is kind of opposite to what you and me and people just walking around, what I would suggest. Sports psychology dictates you want somebody to access their highest level of potential. So what do? Here's a little insight. You actually want to build up this person to the point that they believe they're a god.
Yeah.
You know, why? Because that level of confidence will help that person access the talent that they had. But then what it's like to retire and come off of that, I'll be perfectly honest, I want to hear more from you guys. I want to know more because we didn't really get deep enough. We just scratched the surface of that. So I would love to know, how do you transition from that level of, and we talked about it, and they were the first ones to say it's an irrationally high level of confidence and it doesn't fit the rest of life once you retire. So that would be the next question I would ask these guys is, how do you transition from that, going from this, you know, the world centers around you, which is what you need, to not that anymore. So that'd be my